Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy today's video. Enjoy watching.
A surprising discovery. When I went down to the barbecue grill below my apartment to buy food, I ordered $0 worth of food, but they charged me $50. I asked for $50 worth of food and they added $100 to the bill. I thought they were just trying to survive, so I didn't complain. I didn't want to bother the busy store, so I took 2 extra bags and ran to the car. Later that day, the owner's mother, Marta, burst into my office building, shouting, "You left without paying," with a venomous tone. My mind started racing. Had my payment not gone through? I quickly checked my payment history on my phone, and everything was fine. I had definitely paid. I showed Marta the transaction receipt on my phone, saying, "I paid this, it must be a misunderstanding." But she insisted that I had only paid for the chicken wings and not the extra plastic bags, which cost 5 cents each. The misunderstanding only escalated, with Marta accusing me of taking advantage of a small business because I worked for a big company. She claimed that my company didn't care about hiring people with integrity and that I was a bad person. At this point, Marta's shouting had drawn the attention of my entire office. People started gathering around, curious about the commotion. Even my team leader, Greg Mitchell, came running to try to calm Marta down. Before even asking for my side of the story, Greg told me to just pay her and move on. I contained my anger, knowing that he was right. This wasn't worth fighting about. I had an important meeting with a client in 30 minutes and couldn't afford to waste energy on a ridiculous argument. I agreed to pay Marta, and my colleagues showed that they understood the situation. Many of them looked at me with sympathy, but Marta looked at me as if I was the devil incarnate. She told me that at least I had some decency, but that I shouldn't bother coming back to Minot's if I wasn't going to pay for the bags. She almost spat at me, saying that they didn't serve people without class. I transferred the dollar to Marta, thinking that would end the matter, but she wasn't finished. She pointed at me with her finger and nose in the air, saying, "You know how many bags you've taken before today? I'm asking for at least $50. You're rich, aren't you? Don't be stingy." With gritted teeth, I asked how much she wanted, and she demanded $50. Knowing I couldn't waste any more time, I transferred the $50 to her. As she left with a triumphant smile, I clenched my fists. $50 for 2 plastic bags? It had been months since I'd been letting this abuse slide, thinking it was a way to help them. My dad had even wanted to raise their rent, but I told him not to. They were struggling, and the barbecue was good. I didn't want to pressure them too much. And this was how they repaid me? As soon as Marta left, the tension in the office dissipated. My colleagues gathered around me to console me. "People like her think kindness is weakness," Mia Carter said. "You just have to swallow your pride. If you don't pay, they'll never stop causing trouble." Colin Spencer, who always seemed to enjoy stirring up trouble, chimed in with his petulant tone. "Technically, you didn't pay for the bags at first." She has a point. It's not right to mistreat an old lady like that. I turned to him, my gaze as sharp as a knife. "Colin, have you ever paid for any of the group dinners?" His face turned from green to white to red, but he had no response. He simply closed his mouth and slumped in his chair. I told my dad what had happened, and he said, "Don't worry about it. We'll stop buying from them. Their lease is up in a month. We'll just kick them out when the time comes." After work, I stopped by the bakery and bought a selection of fine pastries on impulse. I also bought a large box of freshly cut durian, a whim I'd been wanting to satisfy. The Maynard family had 3 kids. The eldest was in university, Lily was 13 and in middle school, and Noah was still in elementary school. As I walked past the Maynard grill, Lily and Noah ran towards me, their faces lighting up. Lily followed me like a shadow, her eyes fixed on the box. "Miss Jules, what did you buy? It looks delicious." I said coldly, "Just cake and durian." "Why do you care if I'm not going home?" The word durian made Noah's eyes sparkle with excitement. Without hesitation, he tried to grab my bag. "Miss Jules, how did you know I wanted durian today? Open it and give me some." I held the bag out of his reach with an amused expression. If you want it that much, go buy it yourself. You don't have money. Ask your dad. Noah frowned, clearly annoyed. My dad doesn't have your kind of money. He'd never buy something that expensive. Lily quickly added, yes, if it weren't for you, we'd never get to try something like that. I hadn't realized it before, but these two were just as brazen as their grandmother. Out of pity, I used to share with them whenever they acted like sweet siblings, calling me Miss Jules like I was their favorite neighbor. But not today. When I didn't hand over the goods immediately, Noah tried to grab my arm. Give it to me now, I'm telling you to. I snapped, shaking him off. I'm not your mother. Why should I give you anything? Noah's face darkened. I know you love our barbecue. If you keep acting like this, I'll make sure Dad stops selling to you. Lily abandoned her act of being a good girl and planted her hands on her hips. You always shared with us before. Why not today? Lily's face, with her hands on her hips and that spoiled brat attitude, left me frozen for a second. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. I took a deep breath and felt all the pent-up frustration from months of inflated prices, Martha's humiliations, and Noah's condescending looks boiling up in my chest. There was something so absurd about this scene, two kids, clearly raised to believe that everything was owed to them, demanding something they hadn't even earned. Why not today? Lily had said, as if it was her divine right that I shared something with them. I pressed my lips together to avoid responding with something biting, but I couldn't help it. Lily, Noah, you too, do you even know what the word respect means? Because honestly, it doesn't seem like you've been taught that at home. Their faces changed immediately. Noah scowled, offended, while Lily looked at me like I had just insulted her entire family. My grandma is right, Noah spat, crossing his arms. You're a snob who thinks she's better than us. Just because you have money. But you know what? Without our barbecue, you'd be nobody. Everyone in the building knows you buy from our store because you can't even cook an egg. Noah's words were a low blow, but I wasn't going to let a kid humiliate me in my own building. Noah, I said calmly, though I was seething with rage inside, if our relationship is based on me buying your barbecue, then let me help you. I'm not going to set foot in your store again. And if you think that's going to affect me, you'll be surprised to see how many better options there are out there. Lily's eyes widened like plates, and Noah seemed to be left speechless for a moment. Finally, they turned on their heels and walked away, muttering something under their breath, but I didn't pay attention. My patience had reached its limit. When I arrived at my apartment, I slammed the door shut behind me with more force than necessary, as if that could seal away the bad taste the Maynard kids had left in my mouth. I left the bags on the table and stared at the durian for a few seconds. That fruit, which normally brought me joy with its peculiar aroma and unique taste, now seemed like a reminder of everything I had put up with from the Maynards. I tried to relax, opening the window to let in some fresh air, but the anger was still there, burning like embers under my skin. How was it possible for a family to be so inconsiderate, so shameless? I decided not to let it affect me anymore. I had already ended things with them, or so I thought. It hadn't even been 2 hours when my phone started ringing. It was my dad, who always had the habit of calling me at that time to tell me something trivial. But this time, his tone was different, concerned. Jules, I just got a call from the building administrator, he said with a mix of incredulity and annoyance. It seems that Mrs. Martha has been spreading rumors among the other tenants, saying that you tried to cheat her by taking products from her store without paying, and that you even insulted her grandkids. I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on me. That's ridiculous, I exclaimed, pacing back and forth in my living room like a caged lion. Dad, you know that's not true. That woman is crazy. But he just sighed. I know, honey, but this woman is determined to cause you trouble. I want you to document everything that's happened. If this keeps escalating, we'll take legal action. I hung up the phone with my dad and felt a knot form in my throat. It wasn't sadness, it was pure anger. How dare Martha invent such blatant lies? I sat down in front of my computer and started writing down everything that had happened with the Maynard family from the first day I set foot in their store, every inflated price, every sarcastic comment, every condescending look. As I wrote, the details came back with overwhelming clarity. I remembered the day Martha asked me to help her pick up some bags of flour that had fallen, and how afterwards she called me pretentious for not knowing where everything was in her store. Or the time Lily told me with a fake innocent smile that rich people like me should leave more generous tips. It was like every interaction with them had been a small stab. As I wrote, something inside me changed. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was a cold, calculated determination. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I reviewed my email and found something that filled me with satisfaction: the Maynard family's lease contract. My dad was right. That contract was set to expire in a month. An idea began to form in my head, one that made me smile for the first time that day. If they wanted to play dirty, I could too, but with intelligence and without stooping to their level. I closed my computer and prepared for the next day, knowing exactly what I had to do. The next day, I arrived at work earlier than usual, needing time to organize my thoughts before the chaos of the day began. I reviewed the lease contract again, paying attention to every clause. The most interesting one was a clause that specified that any breach of the terms could result in the immediate termination of the contract. The Maynards had breached something. It was time to find out what. I sent an email to the building administrator requesting a review of the local. It didn't take long before I received a response. "Jules, we've had several complaints from other tenants about bad smells coming from the store and careless waste management. If you want, I can schedule an inspection." Bingo! While I was eating lunch at my desk, I received another unexpected call. It was Greg, my boss. "Jules, I've heard rumors about a problem with a local business. It seems someone is saying that you were involved in an unpleasant incident with a local store. Is it true?" I felt my heart racing, but I took a deep breath. "Greg, it's a misunderstanding. The owner of that store is upset because I wouldn't let her take advantage of me anymore. I'm handling the situation. It won't affect my work." Greg paused before responding. "I trust you, Jules, but be careful. Reputation is everything in this business." His warning left me thoughtful. Martha had managed to spread her venom to my workplace, and I wasn't going to tolerate that. The call from Greg left me with a mix of frustration and determination. I knew Martha wouldn't stop until she made me look bad, but that only strengthened my resolve. That afternoon, I walked past the building where the Maynard store was located. I stopped in front of their store, observing the small details that normally went unnoticed: the cardboard boxes piled up at the entrance, the grease stain near the back door, and the pungent smell of old food mixed with the smell of barbecue. It was clear that the store wasn't meeting the cleanliness standards, and now I had proof. I took out my phone and took pictures of everything, making sure to capture every angle. If Martha wanted to play dirty, I was more than prepared to use the truth as my weapon. As I was walking back to the building, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. Noah and Lily were at the entrance of the building, accompanied by a man who I assumed was their father. He looked just as haughty as Martha, with a look that screamed disdain. I approached them calmly, but before I could say anything, the man spoke first. "So, you're the famous Jules. My mother has told me all about you. What a shame, a woman like you intimidating an old lady and her grandkids." His sarcastic tone and words made me boil inside, but I kept my composure. "Mr. Maynard," I said with a cold smile, "how curious that you mention intimidation. Is that what you teach your children, because they seem experts in manipulation and blackmail?" My response took him by surprise, but before he could respond, I raised my phone and showed him one of the pictures I had just taken. "And by the way, I think the building administrator will want to see this. I wonder if the health department will also be interested." Mr. Maynard's face went through a range of emotions in a matter of seconds, from haughty confidence to surprise and then to barely concealed fear. "What are you insinuating?" His voice was much less sure. Noah and Lily looked at each other nervously, as if they knew something bad was coming. I took a step closer, maintaining my firm but calm tone. I'm not insinuating anything, Mr. Maynard. I'm stating that your store doesn't meet basic hygiene and safety standards. And not only that, your mother has been spreading lies and rumors about me among my colleagues and neighbors. This isn't just a problem between you and me, it's something bigger now. The man swallowed visibly, but tried to maintain his posture. This is a personal attack. You and your family want to ruin us because you can't accept that my mother is right. The irony of his statement almost made me laugh. Personal attack? How funny, coming from someone who has allowed his mother to publicly insult me and whose children have tried to blackmail me. But it's okay, Mr. Maynard. Keep thinking what you want. I just wanted to let you know that if I decide to take action, I have everything I need to do so. I turned to leave, but not before adding, and tell your mother to enjoy the time she has left in her store. I think she'll be looking for a new place to set up shop soon. When I entered my apartment, I felt a mix of emotions. I had managed to put Mr. Maynard in his place, but there was still much to be done. I couldn't trust that they would just sit back and do nothing. I decided to send the photos to the building administrator, along with a detailed description of what I had seen. I also suggested that he conduct an immediate inspection, as the situation seemed to be getting worse by the day. Shortly after, I received a response. Thank you, Jules. We will proceed with the inspection tomorrow morning. We will keep you informed. I felt relieved, as if finally something was moving in the right direction. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept with the feeling that I had control of the situation. The next morning, I woke up early and checked my phone anxiously. There were no messages from the administrator yet, but I knew the inspection was scheduled for the early hours of the day. I took a coffee and looked out the window, waiting for that visit to mark the beginning of the end for the Maynards. My tranquility didn't last long, because as I was leaving my building to go to work, I found Marta waiting for me at the entrance. She was standing with her arms crossed and an expression that mixed fury and defiance. So now you're trying to destroy us, she spat, her voice so shrill that it made passers-by turn to look. Marta, please, I don't have time for your dramas, I replied, trying to pass her by. But she blocked my way, more determined than ever. Listen to me, girl, she said, getting close enough that I could smell the stench of her cheap perfume. My family has been in this business for decades, and I won't let someone like you come and ruin us. I couldn't help but let out a sarcastic laugh. You know, Martha, this isn't personal. But if you and your family can't follow the rules, then maybe you don't deserve to be here. It's that simple. I didn't make the rules, I'm just using them to my advantage. Why don't you focus on improving your store instead of wasting your time threatening me? Her face turned bright red, but before she could respond, her phone rang. She muttered something incoherent and her expression changed to a mix of surprise and concern. This isn't over, she said before turning on her heel and disappearing into the crowd. When I got to work, I found it hard to concentrate. My mind kept wandering back to Martha and her reaction. What had she said on that phone call that had made her so nervous? As I tried to focus on my tasks, I received an email from the administrator, Jules. The inspection had revealed multiple serious health and safety violations, and the Maynard family had been notified that they had to close their store temporarily until they resolved the issues. If they didn't comply within 2 weeks, their contract would be canceled for good. I felt a wave of satisfaction reading those words, but I knew this wasn't the end. Martha would do everything in her power to complicate the situation before accepting defeat. That evening, as I walked home, I noticed that the Maynard store was closed, the lights off and a makeshift sign reading "Closed for Maintenance" hanging crookedly on the door. I couldn't help but smile at the sight of the empty storefront. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. However, my instincts told me not to let my guard down. The Maynard family wasn't the type to accept consequences graciously. As I passed by the store, I saw Noah and Lily peering out the window, their faces somber. I didn't stop to talk to them, it was their turn to deal with the consequences of their actions. When I got home, my father called me again. "Hey, kiddo, I just heard that the Maynards are furious," he said with a chuckle. Martha even called the administrator and threatened to sue him if he didn't cancel the inspection. But it looks like they don't have a leg to stand on. Everything is documented. His laughter was infectious, but I still felt a twinge of unease. "That's great, Dad, but I have a feeling they're going to try something else. These people don't give up easily." My father sighed. "If they do, we'll be prepared. Just remember, the best way to deal with people like them is to stay one step ahead." That night, as I was eating dinner, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Lily standing in front of me, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. "Miss Jules, I need to talk to you," she said, her tone trying to be polite but failing to hide her resentment. I crossed my arms, hesitant to let her in. "What do you want to say, Lily?" I asked, deciding to hear her out. "Look, I know my grandma has been mean to you, but closing our store isn't fair," she said, her eyes darting towards the hallway as if she feared being overheard. "My dad says you could help us fix this." Her request took me by surprise. Help them after everything they'd done? "Lily, do you really think it's my job to fix the problems you people caused?" I asked, my tone making it clear I wasn't interested in caving to their manipulation. Lily seemed to stumble for a moment, as if she hadn't expected me to be so direct. She looked down, but her tone changed, becoming more insistent. "I know we've had problems, but my dad says you could talk to the administrator and tell him it was a misunderstanding. If you do that, we could keep working and not have to leave the building." Her words turned my stomach. It was incredible how even in a moment like this, the Maynards still thought the world revolved around them. "Lily," I said slowly, letting each word sink in, "this situation is not a misunderstanding. You people chose not to follow the rules, chose to treat me badly, and lied about me. I don't have an obligation to save you from the consequences of your own decisions." She clenched her fists, clearly frustrated. "But you could help us. You have no idea how hard our life is, always struggling to keep the business afloat, and now you're taking away the only thing we have." Her plea almost moved me, but I remembered all the insults, all the humiliation, and the way they treated me as if my kindness was a weakness. "Lily, if you really want to save your business, maybe you should start by taking responsibility for your actions. Tell your grandmother to stop blaming others for her problems, but I'm not going to intervene. And if your family keeps harassing me, I'll make sure you don't just lose the store, but any opportunity to open a business here again." Lily looked at me with tears in her eyes, but there was something in her expression that told me they weren't tears of sadness, but of impotence. She turned and ran out without saying a word, leaving me with a sense of relief and tension. I knew this wasn't the end. The Maynards weren't the type to accept defeat easily. The next day, the administrator called me early in the morning. "Jules, I wanted to let you know that the Maynards have left a formal letter requesting that the decision to close their store be reviewed. But considering all the evidence, I don't think they have much of a chance." I felt relieved to hear that, but the administrator's tone put me on alert. "Anyway, be careful. Martha has been asking about you, and it seems like she's looking for something to use against you." That warning left me thinking all day. Martha wasn't one to give up, and that meant I still had to be prepared for anything. That evening, when I came home from work, I saw something that made my hair stand on end. My apartment door was slightly ajar. My heart began to pound as I slowly approached it. I looked around the hallway to see if anyone was nearby, but it was empty. I pushed the door open carefully, and my eyes quickly scanned the interior. Nothing seemed out of place, but a chill ran down my spine. I had forgotten to close the door when I left. It wasn't something I usually did. I checked every corner of the apartment, but everything was intact. However, on my table, I noticed something that wasn't there before, a small white envelope with my name written in hasty handwriting. I opened it and found a folded sheet with a message that read, "This isn't over. Be careful." I froze, the letter trembling between my fingers. The threat was obvious, and although there was no signature, I didn't need to think much to know who was behind this. My first instinct was to call the police, but something held me back. Martha and her family had always been careful with their dirty game, never leaving clear evidence that could incriminate them directly. Calling the authorities without more proof might not lead me anywhere, and worse, it could make them more aggressive. Instead, I took a photo of the envelope and the message and stored it carefully as evidence. I called my father to tell him what had happened. "You're not alone in this, Jules," he said firmly. "We'll resolve it, but don't let them intimidate you." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every small sound in the building made me jump. I felt trapped in my own home, something I had never experienced before. The next day, I decided to take more drastic measures. I had been patient, I had tried to resolve things fairly, but the Maynards had crossed the line. I went directly to the building administrator and showed him the note. "This is no longer just a contract issue," I said. "It's a security matter." The administrator, visibly concerned, promised to take action. I also hired a locksmith to change the locks on my door and added security cameras to my apartment. I was no longer going to let them or anyone else make me feel vulnerable in my own space. Every step I took made me feel stronger, more confident that I was doing the right thing. The next day, I received an unexpected call from the building administrator. "Jules, I wanted to let you know that we've proceeded with terminating the maintenance contract. Their store will be evicted in a week if they don't comply with the legal requirements to stay." The news left me with a mix of relief and anticipation. It was time for them to finally face the consequences of their actions. But I also knew that this would be the most delicate moment. Martha wouldn't just sit back and lose her livelihood. That afternoon, as I walked towards my apartment, I noticed a strange movement near the Maynard store. Martha was standing by the entrance, talking to a tall, burly man I had never seen before. Her expression was darker than ever, and although she tried to maintain her composure, there was an evident nervousness in her body language. I decided not to linger, but I couldn't help feeling a knot in my stomach. When I arrived at my floor, I turned on the security cameras I had installed the night before and checked the surroundings through the window. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was about to happen. That night, as I worked on my computer, I heard a loud knock on my apartment door. My heart skipped a beat. I walked towards the door with caution and looked through the peephole. It was the burly man I had seen earlier with Martha. "Who is it?" I asked firmly, although my insides were trembling. "I'm a friend of the Maynards," he replied with a dry tone. "I just want to talk." My instinct screamed at me not to open the door. "Sorry, but I'm not interested in talking. If you have something to say, you can do it through the building administrator." The man chuckled and walked away, but his presence left a heavy atmosphere behind. I knew this wasn't over, but I also knew I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. The next morning, I reviewed the recordings from the security cameras I had installed. I wanted to make sure everything was quiet during the night. To my surprise, the burly man had returned later, around midnight. He had been lurking in the hallway, looking towards my door as if he was waiting for something. Luckily, he hadn't tried to enter, but seeing him there, stalking, put my nerves on edge. I decided to send the video to the building administrator, along with a description of what had happened. "This is no longer just a business issue," I said in the email. "It's a matter of harassment and security for the residents. Please take action." Shortly after, I received a response from the administrator, who assured me that the incident would be reported to the authorities and that they would speak with the Maynards to warn them about the legal consequences if they continued with this behavior. That afternoon, as I was returning home, I saw a truck parked in front of the Maynard store. They were loading boxes with what appeared to be kitchen equipment and supplies. Martha was there, supervising everything with her characteristic look of disdain. But what caught my attention was Lily, who was sitting on the curb with her head down. For a moment, I wondered if they had finally understood that they couldn't get away with their behavior. But when Martha saw me, her expression hardened. "This isn't over, Jules," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear as I passed by. I decided to ignore her and continued walking towards my apartment, but inside, the tension was growing. Martha could say what she wanted, but I knew she had no advantage at this point. However, the threat still lingered like a dark cloud that wouldn't dissipate. That night, as I was getting ready to rest, I received a call from the administrator. "Jules, good news. The Maynards have handed over the keys to the store and are officially evicted. But he wanted to warn me that Martha had mentioned that she would seek a lawyer to file a formal complaint against me and the building. Although the news of the eviction brought me relief, the idea of facing a lawsuit, no matter how unfounded, made me grit my teeth. Thank you for letting me know," I replied. "I'm prepared for whatever comes next." And I was. I had spent too much time tolerating their games. If they wanted a legal fight, I was more than ready to give it to them. During the following days, the Maynard store remained closed, and their move left the space empty. The building seemed more peaceful without them, but the threat of a possible reprisal still lingered in my mind. I decided that I couldn't let my guard down. I hired a lawyer to review any moves the Maynards might attempt legally and to ensure that my position was protected. "They don't have a solid case," the lawyer said confidently. "If they try to sue you, it will be a waste of time and money for them. But stay alert to any other type of behavior. These people sound problematic." His words reassured me, but also reinforced my determination. The Maynards no longer had power over me. A week later, as I was going down to the lobby to pick up a package, I ran into a neighbor I hadn't seen in a while. "Jules," she said with a nervous smile, "I heard about everything that happened with the Maynard store. What courage you have." I stopped, surprised by her words. "Courage?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. She nodded quickly. "Oh, yes. Many people in the building knew what that family was doing, but no one dared to confront them. Martha was intimidating. But you put an end to it. I think now we can all breathe a little easier." Her comment made me reflect. I hadn't realized how much this situation had affected the other residents. For the first time, I felt that my struggle had had an impact beyond myself. That night, as I looked out the window of my living room, I saw the workers cleaning the space that once belonged to the Maynards. They were dismantling the remains of the business, and the lights of the place seemed to be extinguished for good, like a definitive closure. I felt at peace, something I hadn't experienced in months. I had regained my tranquility, and most importantly, I had learned not to let others abuse my patience. I decided that this chapter was closed. Martha, Noah, Lily, and Mr. Maynard were no longer part of my life, and any attempt by them to return would be met with the same firmness with which I had handled everything else. I was finally ready to move on, leaving behind not only the problems, but also the lessons learned.